Hi, Stacy.
Hey, Stacey.
Hi.
How are y'all?
I feel like I have not seen you. It's been Jessica. Jessica is the new Pam.
Okay, awesome. How was APH last time?
It was super busy. Yeah, and they're in the new building.
Do we want to wait a few more minutes or do we
Hmm?
want to go ahead and jump in?
Let's just jump in. Jessica, did you say you're recording? Yep, she's
I
got
just hit record.
okay, you go, girl.
All right, awesome. Well, we are starting week 3 and we are focusing on chapters 6 and 10. So those were really focusing on the learning media assessment. And then I paired that with chapter 10 because it was also a section that kind of wrapped up all of the assessment tools and combined that all together. So I feel like we're really kind of wrapping up the assessments so that we can look towards next time with more of the interventions and routines and how to actually put this all into practice. So I want to make sure today we address any questions that you have about the assessment tools. Hold on.
I've got everybody muted. And apparently Stacy. So hold on. Sorry.
Okay. Oh, you muted me.
Yes,
Okay.
because we had somebody come in without their microphone muted. So sorry
Okay.
about that,
Okay.
Stacy. I was trying to help, but yeah, fail.
Okay. Perfect. No worries. I think, are we good to go? Everybody can hear me?
We're good.
Okay, awesome. What I was saying is that our focus on chapter 6 and 10 is really going to wrap up all of the assessment tools that we're going to use, leading us to the information that we're going to use to design our instructional routines, which is what our next session is on. So I want to make sure today we look at all the parts of the assessment where we really talk about the learning media assessment. I want to show you the tools both in the book, and then I've shared some digital copies as well. And then just answer any questions you have so that you can feel really confident in putting these into practice. So the first assessments that we talked about last time were that present level assessment. And that's really where we were determining which zone is your student primarily functioning in, whether that's extended states, attention, exploration, or function level. And you're going to do that through observations of your student in one-on-one, highly preferred activities. So you're going to be taking some video maybe or observing in person and gathering that data. We also talked about how to use that same data, those same observations, to get some information about your students' sensory efficiency. And this is, how are they accessing those activities? How are they using their different senses? And we talked a little bit, we had some good conversation about the primary learning channels and the secondary learning channels. Today, we're really looking at that learning media. So what are the actual objects or experiences that motivate your student? We're going to really nail down specifically what those are. These are the ways that we're going to engage them in learning to kind of open up the opportunities for using and increasing their sensory efficiency and making progress through those different zones. So I was really thinking about, I don't know, sometimes it gets kind of easy to confuse. You know, we got the sensory channels, we have the sensory preferences and the primary and secondary, and then, you know, we're making recommendations on learning media and how does that all fit together? So I tried to think of an analogy, and the best that I could come up with was thinking about physical fitness. Like if I were really wanting to get into shape, and so maybe I wanted to get some input from a trainer and get some ideas on how to improve. And so the first thing that you might do is just think like, where am I at all? Like, what's my present level with my fitness? Do I even know where the gym is? Like, do I know how to get there? Am I going to the gym, and do I even engage with anything, or am I just kind of walking around? Like, what's my current level, right? So that's kind of your present level. How are you participating with physical fitness in the gym? Then that trainer is going to do some assessment about maybe your cardio functioning. Like how is your cardio? We're going to do some tests. We're going to, get you on that treadmill and like see how you do, get some baseline of how you're really functioning. And what is that cardio level? So maybe that relates to the sensory efficiency, like how well are we really doing in accessing the environment? And then once we have that information, then the trainer, if they're a good trainer, they're going to say, okay, how do we help you get to your fitness goals? Like what's going to motivate you? Are you a type of person who really likes that Zumba class? Or are you just like a stationary bike kind of girl? Or, are you a CrossFit kind of thing? So what is it that's going to motivate you to get in the gym and get active and really get to your fitness goals? So that's like the learning media assessment. We got to figure out what's going to be motivating. How can we really get our student engaged with us so that we can increase their sensory efficiency? This is how they're accessing their environment, and then also make progress through those zones. So hopefully if I'm trying to get fit through all of this, eventually, like I'm going to have my car in autopilot, going to know where that gym is. I'm going to walk in, I'm going to know exactly what to do. I'm going to be in a much better position to be successful, and I'm going to have fun, and I'm going to be like in the best shape of my life. So that's kind of the goal. And that kind of relates to, that's the best analogy I could think of for how these assessments fit for our students. Any thoughts on that? Does that make sense? Is that something that you can relate to? Any questions about these different assessments and what each one is for and what it's assessing?
I think that was a good analogy, Stacey.
Okay. Thank you. I think we use so many kind of overlapping terms. And I also think that sensing and learning challenges us to really look at this population of learners completely differently than any other learners on our caseload. When we are doing a learning media assessment for many of our other students, we're really looking at how are they able to access print, right? We're looking at, what are their abilities in pre-Braille readiness skills, or how are they accessing, are they able to see print at all? And is that efficient for them? We're really thinking about pretty literacy focused, how they need to learn and access their literacy program and everything that they're learning in their classroom. For our sensory motor stage learners, we know they're using all their senses. And we know that in order to learn about objects in the world around them, they have to use their tactile sense in combination with that vision if they have any. And all those other senses are just helping to build and expand their understanding. So we have to open those doors to as much extent possible for them, and then help them to build those cognitive skills of exploration and cause and effect and understanding what objects are. And it really is the foundation of literacy for them. This is kind of setting the stage for literacy to come. We have to have these skills established before any of those other literacy skills can take hold. And the learning media assessment is so much more specific than any of our other learning media assessments, because for this population, we have to say, maybe the red pom-pom is our learning media item. Maybe there's only a handful of things that our student alerts to and engages with. And so we can be really specific about what our recommendations are for them and for their learning and for the types of materials that we want to use for them. And so that's kind of the main goal here with that learning media assessment, is to pinpoint some very specific items that we've noticed that they really love and engage with. So I would love to be able to share my screen if you don't mind. I want to take a look at the digital tool that I shared and how I use that to collect learning media information.
You're good to go.
Awesome.
Daisy.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So you have some good examples in the book in chapter 6 that show how we collect that information from the learning media assessment. I'm going to just walk you through this tool here. This is the spreadsheet that I have pulled all the information. So it has all the information from the present levels and the sensory efficiency information, positioning guide, and all of those pieces. And then today we're going to focus on these other tabs that are the learning media assessment pieces. So the first thing that we want to do is, and a lot of these are just kind of helpful planning tools that are just going to help make sure that you're thinking through all the different factors for your student to be successful and get the information you need. So the first one here is the learning media exclusion guide. And this is just where you're going to get with parents or the classroom teacher or anybody else on the team. And you are going to get some information about things that you know that the student does not like. You're going to avoid that. No need to assess that if we already know. And then definitely anything that might cause them to have a seizure or that they're just not allowed to engage with. Maybe they don't take food by mouth and you want to avoid that altogether, or certain things we should know about things that would just cause them to go into an extended state. So you're going to get some information if there's anything you need to exclude. The next tab is the sheet that helps us plan out our sessions. So this is where you're going to think through how many different times are we going to come and do this? We probably don't want to do it all at one time. These students, we don't want to send them into sensory overload or push them too far. So anybody who knows them best would probably let us know, this is the best time of day to come. And maybe you have about 10 minutes at a time to get some good data before they totally shut down. And you want to think about, okay, within that amount of time, how many items is reasonable to show them? Because again, we're not just trying to show everything possible. We really want to get a good indication of what they do and do not like. So this tool here is just going to help plan that out. You may also be able to think about, where is the best place to do this? Are we able to do it in the classroom, or can we pull them somewhere that maybe has some less distractions and things like that, just to get kind of best possible opportunity for true responses to these items. We're going to look back at that positioning summary, talk to our PTs or OTs, and think about the best positions for the student to be in for some of these different sensory type of experiences. And then, do we need to have any breaks between presenting the items? So again, just helpful. You can spend a lot of time doing this. Maybe if you know the student, this wouldn't take a long time, but really good information just to set yourself up for success. And then the media guide. This is just going to help you plan through all the different sensory channels and think about what are some items that maybe the student hasn't engaged with, especially if they're ones that you really struggle to get a response from. You may really want to think outside the box and come up with some different experiences. So thinking through each of the areas, what are things that you might bring and share with them? Millie does not recommend showing at one time, just doing all tactile items or all visual or all auditory. She really recommends, maybe picking for each session, a couple, just a couple, and spread it out through the different channels. Again, just to try to get the best responses possible. And then as you're thinking about these media items, I do want to point you to one of my favorite resources in the book, which is in the appendix. It's Appendix E on page 234, if you have your book. And I'll give you a minute to kind of look through. This has some of Millie's favorite learning media items. And these are particularly things that you probably would not come upon in a classroom. We all notice those things that we see pretty regularly or are kind of a go-to for us in our assessment bags. But these are things that are kind of outside your normal type of materials. And they're really good things, especially for those kids, again, who you've tried everything and you really struggle to come up with things that you think that they really like. as you take a look, is there anything that jumps out as something that you've never thought of before? Something really interesting that you might like to try? I think maybe one of the most random ones, but I think is pretty cool. Just I would never have thought of before is lettuce. I mean, who would ever think of that? But if you really think about it, it's got a really cool texture and sound, and it's often wet, and a lot of our students do like water. So I don't know why I find that to be a really fun one. Somebody asked about a picture of the barrel, which what page is that one on? I'm trying to remember if I know what that is. 234. Remember the barrel. You know, I'm not sure. I'll have to ask Millie about that one. Tactile vestibular. So there must be some kind of movement to it. I don't know if it's like a barrel. Would y'all think that's something that they get inside and it's some kind of movement too? The vestibular makes me think it's something that they're experiencing, that rocking motion, but I'll have to ask her.
It seems like it could even be like a wheelbarrow.
That's true. That's true. Yeah,
The whole
it says,
concept lesson right there, Stacy.
I know. Seriously. One thing a lot of people ask about in this learning media menu is on some of the items, there's like an S and an I symbol. And that means the item can work well with a switch interface. So if you have those, it's good to know, especially for students that you know you're going to probably be working towards function level skills. Those might be things that you try because they'd be really great for working on that tool use with the switches. But a lot of these are just really fun and different. The parachute, it brings me back to my childhood elementary school days with the parachute. And I always get excited when I show up to PE and it's a parachute day. But I found that even students with pretty minimal hand abilities to grasp you can kind of loop the parachute onto a finger, or maybe their hands are in a position they can kind of hold that parachute, and just the rocking with the air movement. I found they can get pretty excited about, and it can be pretty fun. So anyway, this is just a great resource as your team is looking through and thinking through some items that you can bring for your learning media assessment. I really like getting our OTs involved in helping pick out these items. I find that they're very invested in this part of the assessment because they're looking for sensory items as well that help alert and engage the student. A lot of OTs will include some of this information in their report. So again, always great to look for those opportunities where we kind of have both have a vested interest in the outcome. So that's a great one. So once you have all of your materials and you've kind of planned out when you're going to go and how you're going to do it, that's when you're going to actually go out, and on the different sessions, you'll take the data from what you've observed. So in here, you would just write what the item is, and then a system. So which sensory system? Again, sometimes it's going to be one thing, one system, and then sometimes it could be multiple, obviously. So you can note that there. You're just trying to get an idea if there's any one, preferred sensory system that the student really likes. Then you're going to rate it either a plus or minus. So did they like it or not like it? And then you're going to rate it 1, 2, or 3 based on how much they either liked it or didn't like it. So 1 would be, lowest, and then 3 would be really strong reaction. So we're really looking for best case scenario. You're going to find some things that they have a +3 reaction to. That's the best. Those are things that we're trying to find. Then in the column D here, you have accommodations. Oh, somebody found the barrel. Nice. In the accommodations, this is where you're going to put anything that you've done as you're presenting and engaging the child in that media item. So are you presenting it a certain way visually? Are you providing some support physically to them for their engagement? So again, this is just kind of helping you later to come back and be able to say, these are some tools we might put in as accommodations or some ways to present the materials. You might also indicate there, what is the environment like? Did that impact their reaction at all? That might be something that you come back and say, I noticed we had, to add some, some black behind us to decrease some of the visual distractions going on. We really took that into account. So that way you're setting the person up for best success if they're going to use that in a routine. So you want to use those same accommodations or try it again differently with different accommodations that might help. And then I really like this last column here. It gives you a place to put if you notice a delay in a reaction to any of those items. So we know this is obviously something with many of our students with CVI. We can factor in that delay. We want to offer some time for a response and be respectful of that. And also it just gives us an indication that, okay, we see a consistent delay with certain types of items and that's okay. Or is this something we want to decrease over time? Or maybe if they're responding very quickly, that also gives us an indicator of, wow, this must be really motivating because it's really connecting and resonating with them quickly. So again, just some good data and information to help you. I think in chapter 10, I'm trying to think, I think on page 119, I think gets us to the learning media section on chapter 10. And there was a great, sorry. Oh, on chapter 117, there's some good tips for getting some of the information just as you're doing learning media assessment. And it kind of gives you some guidance, like when to kind of shut it down. If the student's really fussy and agitated, probably need to shut it down or give them some time to regroup if they've experienced something that was like a -3. We probably don't need to go on directly to the next item. And then it also says if you've presented item for 15 seconds and there's no response, then you can mark no response. So, that's always a question. And your students probably have some input from the team members, but there's a time limit, right? We don't need to just kind of wait and hope and then maybe our student's going to shut down, fall asleep and disengage. So these are just some good kind of tips for as you're doing the learning media assessment. If you have questions and run into scenarios, she gives some good tips there. Any questions about the learning media assessment process? Has anybody done a learning media assessment like this before?
Stacy, this is Pam. I think all of us old school people have, but we've maybe not documented it this well. So this is the piece that I'm appreciating.
Yes. And if you've used the sensory learning kit in the past, she's just kind of rebranded the name. It was called the sensory response record, and it was pretty much the same way to do it. But I really like that she's kind of changed the name to learning media assessment, I guess, to give us some guidance on how to use this information, that we're collecting this information to help make recommendations to the team on what materials we can be using. So I think it really gave me a purpose behind why we do it, how to collect the data really nicely. And then I also shared the template of how to turn that into your actual learning media assessment. If you want to take this and then write it up in your evaluation, that you have to update every 3 years. So this is one of these great tools that I actually kind of use and build on all the time, but then it's really nice when it comes time for a report and I need to make some good recommendations, I have data to pull from. But we actually just kind of anecdotally, I'll share that my team has a Google form that we've used with this same information. So we've plugged it into a Google form template so that we can put, what did we use, the responses, et cetera. And we just add to it all the time. So if we ever decide, we're going to bring something a little different this time and just see what they think, we go ahead and take data on that. And we use that kind of as a running record of learning media preferences. Another idea that a classroom teacher shared that they've started doing that I think could be a nice recommendation, if you want to share it, is that, they felt kind of overwhelmed by wanting all of this information for all the kids in their class, but how am I going to make time to do it? And so they started doing one learning media item during a circle time activity. So maybe a couple times a week, they would just bring a different item and have a chance to present it with each child and take data on the child's response. So again, that could look differently depending on the classroom or the types of materials, but again, just an opportunity to try to get information and take that, write it down so that when you're coming back to that situation where you want to write a routine, you're not trying to remember, what do they like? I can't remember if they like that or not. You have a really good place with some good data to pull from. So those are just some ways to maybe kind of fit it in and remember that sometimes we're doing it, right now because I'm writing a report, or wanting to build a routine, but other times, like, we know this is an ongoing process and maybe we have one routine, but we know down the line we'd like to create many routines for this child, and having a good big bank of things that they love is just going to help us out in the long run. So those are some things. And then just like with the other assessments, I would highly recommend videoing any responses that you can. And again, because I've been in situations before where I'm like, man, oh, they really love that, I'm going to rate it a +3. And then 10 items later, I'm like, oh, no, that was a +3. I didn't know they had that big of a response in them. So sometimes it's nice to get the quick videos, and then we just hold off on doing any of the data collection until later. Once we have all the videos, then we sit down and kind of watch them together and take data and discuss what those responses are. And then it doesn't really give a place here, but there are times we'll, be a little bit more specific for those kiddos who maybe their reactions are a little bit more nuanced and difficult to read. You might be really specific about why you rated it that way or what that looked like for them. How do you know that they really loved that or didn't love that? So that information is helpful too. Also helpful on the front end if it's a child you don't know very well. That's great information from a parent or team members that know what you're looking for when you're trying to interpret these responses, because they're a little subjective, for sure. Any other thoughts or questions about the learning media assessment? I'm going to go over to the last page here on the template for the assessments, and there's just a tab that's going to give you a chance to pull all the information you've gathered from your learning media assessment and summarize it. Here, we're really just looking for the plus, the positive reactions. So you're going to disregard anything that was a minus, and you're just going to pull the information here to take note of how many plus things, that they had, and then you can actually list them out. So you might actually list out in tactile, they really liked the fuzzy ball or whatever it was. Like, you're going to list those things out. And then this is what you're going to use as your recommendations for routines and for media items to use for learning. All right, so I think that pretty much goes through the learning media assessment. And like I said, if you need some ideas of what this looks like written out, I think the book does a great job. Page 53 has our student Arna, hers written out from her learning media assessment. And then page 55 has this summary document listed out as well. And then if you flip to back to chapter 11, this has all your blank templates and then just those tips for each of them that you might find helpful. And just like a quick guide for doing any of these assessments. And then since I actually haven't looked, but I'm pretty sure when you go to APH to purchase the book, there's links to the downloads if you want the download that looks like the copy in the book. You can't write in it, but it's like a printable copy of a blank template. If you're more of a paper and pencil person and want to take your data that way, you can print those off directly from the website. Or, the Google templates I really like, mainly because they're good for collaboration and, kind of keep that ongoing record for everybody to add in and move along with. So we like these, we try to build this template with all these different assessments. Each student would have an updated version of this, and this is what we're working for. And if you're kind of thinking towards your caseload and, maybe you have an assessment coming up for a student that fits into this population, maybe next school year, this could be something that you look at of how can I use this assessment as part of my functional vision? What data can I get from here for my learning media? And then also have some really great just cognitive team collaboration assessments that we can use to really build that IEP and make it really strong. All right. Does anybody have any, just from your experiences in general with these students beyond that learning media menu, some things that you've used with kiddos that have been really popular, things that you really like that have worked well? I got to check out that barrel. But any other things that you find? I always like to get ideas from others. I like this barrel. Ah, okay, I've seen one of these barrels before. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I don't think I have any in my district right now, but if you do, and then, some other things like that would be, just a rocking chair or just even like on your lap with the rocking. And if that's something that they really like, then you decide you want to spend $1,400 on the barrel. I don't think APH sells that. Okay, well, if anybody has any great ideas, let me know. You can pop it in the chat. I'm trying to get to my slides. Okay, I think we pretty much walked through learning media assessment materials, how to write the record, and then the template. I'll peek at that real quick with y'all. I copied it into the email, but again, this is just a really great way. I've literally copied and pasted some of her paragraphs into my assessments so that you can really explain the rationale behind this learning media assessment and why you're using it for your recommendations. And it talks about, just the efficient use of all the sensory systems is critical at this stage of learning. It explains the primary and secondary systems and why at the sensory motor stage, we need that touch as primary. And then, I'm sorry, I know it's a lot of print. Direct assessment of highly effective learning media. And then it just shows, again, how you can put in that whole chart where you're summarizing their preferences. She's still using this is a little bit older, so it still has the appetite and aversions as the titles there. That's from the sensory learning kit. So that verbiage might be updated. The other thing that's on here is down at the bottom. Some really good recommendations for accommodations. So this is just a really, another nice supplement for if you notice some aversions, if you notice some things that really send students into extended states and are barriers, these are some things that you might consider for adding to your accommodations, which again is just really nice when you're writing a report and wanting to make it meaningful for this population. I can definitely say that many of my early learning media assessments for this population looked very similar. They were kind of pretty generic in general, that the students, maybe I would write something like the students access their environment using a multisensory approach, that they respond to, using all of their senses unless there was a specific barrier. But here we can flip that and say that that is necessary for learning. And here are some ways that we know that they're motivated, engaged, and some very specific items we can use. All right. Not very many questions. Everybody must feel very confident. Good, that's awesome. Well, just kind of a preview into next time. I can't remember if I have this slide here. So again, just to kind of take us to where we're going with this information. We've talked about, understanding where our students are. And that's going to help us really decide, like, what do we need to work on? What goals do we want to focus on when we're designing instruction? Sensory efficiency. Do we have barriers with how they're accessing their environment? Do we need to build opportunities for them to use those primary sensory channels? Learning media. What is going to be the thing or the items or the activities or experiences that are going to alert them and engage them and motivate them to do all that hard work, especially for our students where, we're maybe our present level is an extended state and we're struggling just to pull them out and to help them maintain attention. We have to really make sure that we are using something that they love and that it's going to motivate them and capture their engagement and attention so that we have something to build on. And then these three pieces are what's moving us towards our next focus, which will be designing that instructional routine. And that's really the heart of where all this is leading to, because that's our main instructional approach, is that routine. And so next time we're going to talk about what makes a routine and how we design it. But all this back work that we've done is going to make that process so much easier. So you're looking at these assessment pieces and thinking, okay, what does my student really love? So for Arna, for example, she really loved the bells. That was something that alerted her and engaged her, and her present level was attention. So we knew we had to work on exploration skills as our next skill. So how do we take her preferred media item of bells and turn it into a routine to teach her the new skills for exploration? So it takes some creativity to get to that point, but we're not just pulling things out of thin air. We know exactly what she likes and we know what we need to work on. So now we just have to put those things together and, make that instructional routine. But we're not pulling out of thin air. We're not, just trying anything that can work. We're being very strategic and intentional about what that's going to be. And we're going to lay it all out in a very specific and accommodated and clear way so that we know that we can be effective. So that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all I have for this time. So again, next time we're really going to be diving into the instructional routine, pulling all of these pieces together. So please, take a moment to read through those sections and come with any questions that you have. Even if you sit on some of this for a while and as you're looking at that routine, you're wondering, how do I pull these pieces there? If you have a chance with any of your students, give some of these pieces a try, even in little bits, and see if if you come upon any kind of barriers for yourself or kind of stumbling blocks and wonder how to work through those, I definitely want to take advantage of our time together. So I can stay on for another minute if anybody wants to ask me any questions, but I think we're good.
Stacy, I think that first of all, I'd have to say thank you, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands that if they have questions about their own child or their own student, that they're more than welcome to use this time to collaborate with you. I've thrown that out multiple times to my team. I'm just surprised that everybody's so quiet. I would just be sucking the existence out of your brain. But
This is Tina. Sorry, I have a croggy voice. Can you hear me already?
Yes, I can.
I just wanted to bring up an experience I had. It was years ago, but I was using a light box and I was changing the colors of the film on the light box. It was okay. But then once I wrapped the color of the film around the kiddo's face like a visor, all of a sudden they were like looking around. I don't know, it was just a totally different experience than just seeing a color in front of him, but then having his whole world in that color. It was he liked it. I mean, he was smiling stuff. It's just interesting, how to present something.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think that's what is so helpful about, the learning media assessment too, is when we take the opportunity, our main goal within that time together with the student is to see how they respond to those different things. Sometimes, again, maybe you're not recording anymore, but like for sure, there were many, many times early in my career where I would just go with a bag of stuff and I didn't really know what I was looking for from the student, maybe just how they were able to look at the items I was providing. Here, it's giving us a different perspective. We're just seeing how they respond. I'm not as necessarily concerned with if they're looking at it or not, but are they showing me that they like it? Like, does this get some sort of different positive reaction from them that gives me something to go on? Like, we can build towards using that vision more efficiently, but first I got to find something that they really like, so just going with the intention of just learning about them, learning about what they like and noticing, right? Like their responses in a different way. So that's really neat that you have that experience. I'm going to definitely have to try that out. I wonder if they make like almost like an umbrella with different colors that they could look through. That'd be kind of cool. Pam, you can suggest it to AP next time you're there.
I think you have a more of their ear, Stacy, than I do. So throw it out for sure.
Anybody else? Any other questions or things you've noticed or run into? For me, this whole approach just helps me feel confident in understanding my role and to not walk in. There were so many times I've walked into assessments or into direct instruction times, and I didn't really, like I said, know what I was looking for or know what my purpose necessarily was in supporting the team. So hopefully just within these assessment tools, you have some pieces of, I'm going to go and observe with the intention of looking at what zone they're engaging in here. Or I'm going with the intention to see, can I get some motivating responses from some different sensory items? So you're going in with a very specific intention. You have some tools to collect that data. And then that just helps you inform the type of instruction that you're going to design so that it's going to have the biggest impact.
It's a quiet bunch. I know this bunch is not quiet. I know most of them.
Sometimes it's hard on a call with a lot of people. So I can stay on for a few minutes if somebody's dying with a question, or you're welcome to email me, if you are trying some of these things out and have a question about it. I'm curious about if anybody's on here, do you find that your teams are open and willing to some collaborative assessments when it comes to this population? Seen some head nods.
I have I I have a student that Pam knows this. We both worked with her. That she just doesn't respond to anything. She has very little expression, and she can move her mouth a little bit. She can lick her lips. She can slightly turn her head a little bit. But I've had some students like that. I just couldn't get any response from. But
Yeah, and that you bring up a great point. And again, it kind of comes back to knowing for your student at the time, like, is eyes open and turning their head a +3 for them? I mean, is that the strongest response that we've seen? And maybe that's what we're looking for to show, okay, they really like this. If that compared to keeping their eyes closed or totally not engaging, right? Like, maybe the reactions aren't quite as obvious or quite as apparent, to what we might expect, with another student. I had one student who she was hooked up to some medical machines. And so we actually were like looking at heart rate. Like, is there anything that is increasing her heart rate at all? Because we weren't getting a whole lot of change in her affect. So sometimes it has to be just looking for whatever those smallest indications of alertness are and going with that.
I agree, Stacy. I remember in one of my other positions, we bought stethoscopes for that very reason. We had several of those kids, and we used those stethoscopes to monitor breathing. So if something changed, then we were able to use that information. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And I think that's part of it. And you hope, maybe if you use that and you have a routine that is, with that item that causes that response and you're building it, maybe there's an opportunity to pull them out a little bit more or increase their alertness and engagement for hopefully some increased reactions. But, gosh, some of these kids are battling so many kind of internal issues going on, so many different barriers to their alertness and expression that I wouldn't necessarily be too discouraged that we're not getting any response. Maybe just tailor your expectations for them to judge their ratings a little bit differently.
This is
Thank you.
Andrea. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I work with kids 0 to 3, and oftentimes I was a former nurse, a pediatric nurse. So, I've learned to look at, movement, like respirations, heart, kind of that different kind of maybe subtle things, but even bringing it, I know this is different from school age, but parents to the fold, a lot of times they're so busy just taking care of things. They don't take time or are unaware to look at those certain things. And then you bring them to their attention. They're like, oh yeah. And those little ways of communicating that they just overlooked in the busyness of being a parent. So sometimes, if there's a way to get with a parent and kind of sit with them for a while, they'll oftentimes, once you kind of bring it to their awareness, they'll be able to give a lot of information about that child once you kind of show them some things to look for and can shed some light on it too.
That's a great recommendation. And even nurses too, some of our students that have a care nurse there with them, a lot of times they'll know some of that information too. Like if you really break it down, like, are there things that you notice, get their respirations or heart rates up? And they can just be really good opportunities for insight. Reading this comment here, can be a struggle to collaborate. Thank you for those comments. Yeah, the collaboration piece is so important. And I think we even have a whole section of our study focused on ways to build in that collaboration and just strategies, that you can use with your teams depending on the dynamics. But I find that with the assessments, it can be a great entry point because especially if it's time for everybody to do an assessment and everyone's going to be doing some work anyway, it just could be a natural opportunity to say like, hey, I went to this training and I have these resources, and Cece said that her whole team, they each, do their parts and they do it together and it worked really well. Maybe it's something that you can try. So I only say that here just to say sometimes, the assessment can be just a good excuse to share it with your team, because, nobody wants more work to do, but if they're already doing work, why not, do it together? And maybe you can kind of take each other's load. Everybody doing it together can make it easier for everyone. And the biggest turning point really for my team, and I think I shared this, was when we originally had Millie come to consult with us, was all of us being a little bit vulnerable to say, like, I don't actually know what I'm doing. Do you? And they're like, no. And so once we all admitted it to each other, then we said, okay, I mean, I wish somebody knew what they were doing, but at least now we all can, relate. And maybe that's when we can bring in a training and bring in some new resources. So a lot of people, it's very rare that anybody learned strategies like this, or even learned strategies at all working for these types of students. Many of us did not learn this in our degree programs. And so it's pretty rare to come to somebody who's like, oh yeah, I know exactly what to do. So just being able to say it's normal, if we've never had a training, together, this is an area maybe we could all learn and work on together. So it was a good relief. Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, once we all admitted it, we're like, okay, we thought you would think I was a horrible vision teacher. But everyone was in the same boat. Even the classroom teachers, again, a lot of them, have degrees, even master's degrees in special ed, but receive very little training for this specific population. So just having tools, and as TVIs, I find that we often are the ones that bring tools like this to the table because we have access to, American Printing House, TSBVI, we have all these great resources that we can bring. So often it's us going, okay, yes, this is my tool that I bought or I've gotten training on, but it's really for all of us. There is a Hive course as well if you have teammates who are interested. I don't know if any of y'all have used the Hive before through American Printing House for the Blind, but there is a course on sensing and learning. So that's a way if people want a summer, flex credit, professional development opportunity. It's a self-paced course, and they will give credit for that and a certificate and everything. So it's a good opportunity as well.
I'm just going to throw out these opening and closing codes so I don't get in trouble. Jessica gave me one task. So opening code is collaborative and closing is future. I guess that's it.
Daisy, I've got the link for the Hive course. I'm just going to stick in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you. Perfect. Next time will be really fun. We'll talk about the routines. I have some fun videos to share, and that's always the fun part of putting it all together. So looking forward to that. And I'll be out of school, so I'll be
Oh yeah.
by then.
Wow, way to rub it in.
Like we've got months to go.
We appreciate you, Stacy. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank y'all. Bye.
Bye, guys.